Okay, Brian, we're live.
All right.
So I'm back from vacation.
Yep.
Back from Montana. That was a long drive.
It's 2 Fridays.
Yeah, two Fridays we missed. I know. People are just dying to get some help on Wi-Fi, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we wanted. First thing we wanted to say is, if anyone has any questions, please post in the comments. We'll answer them on the next vidcast. You know, whatever questions you have, that's what we're gonna pick our topics, right? That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. And you did have a question in regards to something we'll talk about later.
Oh yeah, exactly. I had a non-Wi-Fi related question, but all right. So yeah, please post your questions in the comments, and we'll answer them on either in the comments or on the next vidcast. And then we also wanted to get some input for this new router that EnGenius is coming out with for the cloud.
Gateway, yep.
It's a gateway, yeah. So it's a gateway router, and they want to know what kind of features you might want on this thing. So it's gonna have firewall features, right, Brian? Like,
yeah, we want to know, I do. I want to know kind of like hardware spec we should have, and then software feature set.
Yeah.
Anything, pretty much anything.
Yeah, like the speed of the ports. Like, should you have multi-gig ports? Should you have multiple
SFP,
WAN ports,
SFP
plus ports? I think it should have all that because cost is no option.
8 with SFP plus, multi-gig.
Yeah, should have all that because people will pay anything for it. But no, and maybe price point too. Like, what are you willing to pay for a cloud managed? Well, I mean, it's important, I guess.
That's a loaded question. I want everything for nothing.
Right. So yeah, we want to get that out there. Okay, so then the title of this vidcast is "Don't spend hours on a network problem," right, Brian? Like, so people spend so long troubleshooting problems. Sometimes it's something that should be obvious that it's causing the problem.
It should be obvious, or you could be, by the time you run into the issue and you're getting the stresses of the customer, of it's not working or there's a problem here, you're frantic. Some guys get frantic and so they don't check everything that they should be checking, or they're like, oh, I don't need to check that. They're pretty confident on what they think it's this and it's not that, and so they're frantic running around trying to figure out what the issue is, but they're not checking the basics, basically, is what it comes down to. So.
Right. So do you have a specific incident you want to talk about? Or?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I know you have specific issues too. So how do I do this without calling I'm not going to call anybody out. So yeah, the issue was there was they had an internet service provider connection. When they directly connected to the internet service, they were getting, say, 100 megabits per second, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the speed that they're supposed to get. You connect it directly to the modem, they're getting 100 megabits speed test, basically, right? So when they connected basically the rest of the network, so it went from a modem to multiple switches and then to access points, the speed dramatically dropped. And it was in a large setting, like a warehouse. So the speeds just dropped from 100 to maybe like 2 megabits per second. So we're like, okay, what's going on here? So immediately we asked, okay, so where's the speed problem happening? Is it on the wireless client side? Is it on the wired side? And surprisingly, they told us on the wired side. So that's wow. Okay, that's for us. That's a pretty big issue because typically it's a wireless issue. So it's environmental, and so we have to deal with a lot of things regarding with like the connection and things like that, and like how far away the client is, that kind of thing, what band you're on. But it was it was on the wired side. So they were specifically connecting to a switch, one of our switches, and the speed was dropping to like 2 megabits per second. So that was kind of weird. So it went from the ISP modem to the switch, and on the other side of our switch into the port, it was getting 2 megabits per second. So that was interesting. So we're like, okay, the person had more switches. Let's swap out the switch, see if the switch is bad or something like that. Same thing. The issue is still some very slow speeds. So obviously we were like, okay, let's check another cable that's connecting from the modem to the switch. And so we ran a cable. Still the same issue. Or not a cable, actually. I'm sorry. It was, okay, let's take the switch out of the scenario and connect directly to the modem to see if the speed was there. So the speed was still okay. It was at 100 megabits now. So we took that switch out, and now it's at 100 megabits. So we're going from the modem directly to a laptop. It's getting 100 megabits. From the modem to the switch, it was 2 megabits per second. So we're like, okay, so that's really weird. So you remove the switch and put in a laptop, and now the speed is okay. So obviously we were like, okay, let's swap out that cable. And so the technician was like, okay, yeah, I've done that already. I've tested it, and the cable's fine. We're like, okay, what's the cable length? The cable length was, the cable length is within the distance. And so the distance should be 328 feet or less, right? And so, you want to check the quality of the cable, you want to check the distance of the cable, and, basically to make sure, like, everything is okay. So the customer even put in a different switch, a different vendor switch, and tested from the modem through cable to the switch, and then to his laptop, he was getting 100 megabits per second. So that was really weird. So we were like, okay, do we have a compatibility issue with the particular modem? That's one of the things that, we have to consider and wonder. So the technician has changed everything out. He's checked different ports on the switch. He's checked another one of our switches. He's checked another vendor switch, and it's still showing the 2 megabit or whatever, really slow speed based off the wires on a wired connection. But based off another vendor, it's at the regular speed of 100 megabits. So I think we spent quite amount of time on that.
Yeah.
And so, not to cut to the chase, but what it ended up being, what other things would you have checked? I guess, so let me ask you that first.
What other things would I have checked? You could do things like, checking, using the tool built into the switch to check cable length and for errors. You could make sure that you have the port duplex and speed set correctly. If they're not set to auto, make sure they're not locked at some high rate that you're not going to get. So those are some things you could look at. Obviously see and also on your PC. Make sure that those are set. The speed and duplex is set in your PC, and also energy efficient Ethernet. Maybe try turning that off. I know some of the switches have it, and the computers have it in their advanced settings, right?
Yeah.
So those are some things I would look at. But what was the real problem?
So we did check all that, and over, you have to imagine, like, checking all those things over a period of time, back and forth, phone calls, chat, over a long period of time of troubleshooting this one particular issue. And, obviously the customer, the end user, is getting pretty frustrated, and so is the technician, by the way. And so, the problem was, you have a major problem here, you need to fix your switch, blah, blah, blah. So, you kind of go down that path, and it's like, no, I don't think so. Thousands of these switches are implemented into networks every day. So it's like, I don't, there's something else that's underlying that we're not aware of. And so, yeah, we did go through, we started doing, remotely, we did do counters on the ports and did find errors. And then we could do cable tests, and the cable test was showing that the cable is too long. And so what was happening is, it ended up that the switch was in a particular situation where the tech couldn't get to the switch. So he wasn't testing the actual cable that was actually, the cable was bad, basically, at the end of the day. So the technician wasn't testing the actual cable. He was taking another cable and testing it off another cable.
Oh, okay.
And everything was testing.
Of course, it was great, right?
He was taking the other vendor's switch, putting it in that using that same cable, the good
The
cable,
better cable, the
plus
good
the
cable,
speed.
yeah.
So he's basically reporting back to us that, oh yeah, I've checked that, and he was using a different cable because he didn't want to climb up the ladder to check the other to check the other cable.
Right.
So that's what it ended up. So days of technical support,
Yeah.
trusting that the technician is actually testing everything that we're asking him to test, and it was days of his time, the customer's time,
Yeah.
our time.
Because he didn't want
And
to
so
run
we
that
just,
new cable. Yeah.
yeah, it was just a cable. And so, when you're installing and you're seeing problems, by all means contact the vendor. And it could be us, it could be anybody. But
Yeah.
be sure that you're checking the physical layer. I mean, that is
Yeah.
a major issue that we're running into. That a lot of the technicians have overconfidence in what they've put in.
Yeah.
You need to check it.
Cat
Another
5e or
situation
better.
was-
Cat 5e or better.
Yeah, well, that was another situation where I'm only getting 100 megabits. You're advertising X amount of speed, but I'm only getting 100 meg. They had Cat 5 cable.
Yeah.
on the AP.
Yeah.
So
And I've seen that too because a lot of people just use leftover cables. They'll see like some Eros will ship with like free cables in there, right? And like they'll be like, "Oh, it's a brand new cable. I just take it out of the package," but it's only Cat 5 because they're eliminating pins in there, wires in there to try to make it as cheap as possible using old cables. They ship it with this junk, that the camera or something that only needs 100 meg, and then they have it in their bag and they just pull this cable out and they think it's brand new, it's gonna work.
Yeah. So it's save you could save a lot of time.
Yeah.
A lot of time if you actually check everything. If you're working with technicians and engineers and they're kind of scratching in their head and you're saying that you've checked everything and you haven't really checked everything, you should start to maybe think about checking.
Check the simplest things first. Then is what you want to do. And the cables, and I've seen this happen. You're talking this is a wired situation, but I've had people that install access points and say, "Oh, the Wi-Fi is way slower. The Wi-Fi is only 100 meg," and right there it tells me that that cable from the modem router to the switch is probably a Cat 5, and that's what it was in this situation. He was like, they always say, "I plugged into the router and I'm getting full speed," but they didn't use that same cable.
Yeah.
So be careful with the cables. Because there's so many of them out there, you don't know how old that cable is. I would just buy.
And granted, you're trying to cut costs because you don't want to run cable again.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to know what type of cable's in the wall, or what's been ran, and you definitely want to check the continuity of that cable.
Yeah.
Too.
Make sure it's not too long. It's terminated properly. Yeah, you'll see all kinds of weird problems, especially as the speeds get up faster. Like I'm running 10 gig over Cat 5e at short distances here, and it's working great, but I had to make sure those cables were all terminated really well, and they were under like 50-foot runs and things like that, So as the speeds increase, you have to have even tighter cables if you want to get the consistent connection, because not only will it be slow, it'll work erratically, and it'll disconnect at times and things like that. So you don't want any of that stuff going on.
That's right. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and then in some of the switches, they'll tell you, the speed negotiation. There's a color on the LEDs, and it will tell you the speed that it's negotiated at. So it will basically say if it's linked up at a gig, at 100 meg, at 2.5 gig, at 5, at 10. You can either see that on like a cloud interface, or you can see that right on the physical switch itself. So.
Yeah. So cable quality gets more and more, especially when you're going multi-gig and 10 gig. Because it's utilizing the frequency on that cable even more now, so they've got to be good, and you don't want to you want to set it to auto. You don't want to lock speeds when you're doing multi-gig or 10 gig, because it may have to fall back down if something interference goes on that cable somewhere. So all right. So that's how to fix the problem. Always check the cable first. All All right, so then we want to talk about a couple other things. So we want to talk about the captive portal, like click-through captive portal. So this was some configuration with EnGenius Cloud, but it could be any captive portal. So when you have the click-through enabled on the captive portal, a new user will come. They'll connect to the Wi-Fi. It'll throw up a splash page, so they'll agree to the terms of service, and they'll click continue. Now, there's other parameters in there. So we had some people saying, "Oh, well, it let me in the first time, but then I would remove the Wi-Fi network from my phone, rejoin the network again, it would let me in without having to click through and agree to the terms." So that
Yeah.
So they're wondering what's going on there. So what was that? What did that turn out to be like?
Yeah, that's a. Well, you know this.
Yeah.
You've gone through it a couple times, but yeah, the simple fix is like the session timeout or the idle timeout can be changed.
Right. Right. So
By
go ahead.
default, the session timeout is 24 hours, and the idle time is 60 minutes, so an hour.
Right.
So if you're trying to reconnect and you're not seeing those terms again, then you need to change, and you want to see those terms again. You want to change that idle time or idle time or session time.
Yep. But in most cases, like the 24 hours is actually good. We're thinking about it because, like, if you're in a hotel or something and you agree to those terms, you don't want to have to do it every time you connect, or you may have like email checking or something that's going to time out. If you don't click that banner again, right? So 24 hours is actually a pretty good timeout. So that at least every day they're going to have to go in there and agree to the terms, but you don't want to really set it to every hour or every minute, because every time they reconnect, they'll have to agree to those terms again, right?
Yeah, that would be just too frequent.
Right.
Yeah, so you definitely want to be careful with that. But we've seen this probably 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah.
I think, where that it's just it's under advanced settings, so under captive portal.
Yeah.
So you might miss it, but you definitely want to look for session timeout or idle timeout. So, and you can find that in the user manual as well.
Yeah. So I guess what we're trying to say is, like, during testing, you can't just delete the network from your phone or laptop. You have to, because the timeout's being recorded on the server side, so it'll just see the MAC address of the device again and be like, "Oh, here, agree to the terms. I'm gonna let him in again."
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So we wanted to also talk about the GOTRAX G4 scooters, because we got a question.
Yeah, that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, we got a question on one of our videos, because I posted some videos on the GOTRAX G4. And it just happens that me and Bryan both own this scooter.
Yeah, so it's an electric scooter, which they should probably give you commission on, because you talked me into the scooter.
Oh, I get commission whenever someone buys one. I have my affiliate link there, so I'll put one in the video. But so someone was asking about if we had wobble on the handlebars, and I haven't noticed that. Have you, Bryan?
You said wobble, right?
Yeah, wobble. So I know when you get the scooter, the handlebars, you have to use an Allen wrench to put it on. It's a little tricky, right? Like, it took a little while to get the screws in there just right.
Yeah, from when I set it up, I think I thought it would have been a simple process, but it took longer for whatever reason. I can't remember
it was
why.
hard. I remember it was hard to line the threads up on the screw.
That's what it was. Yeah,
you had to get the threads lined up. So maybe this guy didn't have the screws in properly. That's the only thing, because mine feels rock solid. I mean, doesn't wobble at all. And I was riding that thing when I was out in Montana and Missoula. They have like some great bike trails. I rode that thing for hours out there.
Yeah. Because you're always you don't want to misthread something, or you don't want to strip the threads, because that is like what you're holding on to.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, that thing is fast. The G4 goes up to 20 miles an hour, so it's really fast. One thing I noticed on it is the one thing I don't like on it is the braking system. It only has a single rear disc brake. So this scooter is rear-wheel drive, has the motor on the rear. So I guess they didn't put regenerative braking on it because I guess it would have been hard to do. So most scooters have
cost.
Yeah, probably cost. Most scooters have the motor on the front, so then they have a disc on the back. So then when you're braking, it's using both of those. So if one goes out, if one doesn't hit right, you still have the other. So I think that's important for scooters because they wanted to make this one rear wheel drive. I think so it'd handle better. So it could climb better.
Another thing is, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, it's okay.
Is going up hills too? I guess does it help in that scenario?
It does. Yeah, the rear wheel drive helps because otherwise the front tire kind of can spin out if you're climbing a hill and there's a bump or something. You could lose traction on the front wheel. So having the rear wheel drive does help climbing hills and handling and some other things. But you're left with basically a single disc brake. So I wore my brake pad out. And that's really sketchy, like I replaced them and it's good again, but you're relying on that brake pad. So, if they wear out, you got to be really careful, that, you're not going down a hill.
Mine aren't worn out yet. So.
Yeah. So just keep an eye on those, Brian. But other than that, the scooter's great. The range is good. The speed is good. And it's really built, heavy duty. It's got a locking. It's got a lock on it. Have you used that cable lock yet?
I have not.
I have not. I wanted to use it, but I just take it with me because I don't want to leave it anywhere really. But yeah, so the G4 is good. If you have any questions on that, post in the comments. You ride yours around Redondo,
Yeah.
so it climbs hills pretty well too, right?
I can take it to the hardware store.
Yeah.
I can, if I have to drop the car off to get repaired or something like that, I can throw it in the back in the trunk and then take that back to the house. Yeah, so I do use that, ride it with my daughter too sometimes. So
yeah,
it's definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great to have in the trunk. Like I said, I drove out to Montana like 2,000 miles away. I had it in the trunk, just pulled it out. It's way better than a bike because you don't need a stupid rack on there and the bike's like blowing around the whole time. You know what I mean? Just put it in your trunk and whip it out, and you're passing everybody on the bikes like immediately. So that thing's great. All right, so next week we'll talk some more about Wi-Fi. If you have any questions, again, please post in the comments so that we'll have some material to talk about.
Yeah, you can. I mean, we always have material to talk about.
Yeah, we always do.
Yeah, if you have specific questions, we'd like to try to help people out. If it's home Wi-Fi, is it commercial Wi-Fi? Commercial. Even networking, home networking, commercial networking. If we can help out there, just let us know if you have any questions, and we'll try to answer anything that you may have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so. Obviously we try to deal with business customers most time, hotels and schools and things like that. But if anyone has any home Wi-Fi questions, we're happy to answer those too. So I posted this one out on Reddit today. Hopefully it doesn't get taken down. So if anyone has any home Wi-Fi questions, just post in the Reddit thread or, on the YouTube video link, and we'll answer those next week.
Yeah, and I think we can cover pretty much any vendor really. I mean, it's generally the same in regards to like on the Wi-Fi side. We can try to help out there too.
Yeah, we're vendor agnostic. We love EnGenius, but we'll talk about anything we sell. Yeah, and Keenan sells everything, so yeah. All right, so remember to like and subscribe for more help with Wi-Fi.